Hi, this is Kunal from Loop 91. Welcome to the fourth episode of our UI Builder series. Today, we will be focusing on client script within UI Builder. Client scripts are very similar to JavaScript that runs directly in the browser. We will take a very quick example to understand what we're talking about. So we will go to client script section, click add new, call it log hello, and we will log a message to the console, browser console. Apply. This you can see now is a client script, and we will connect this to the event handler of this button. Events, add handler, click client script, log hello, continue, add, save, and we will quickly open the preview, and we will open the client console, browser console, and click on hello, and you said hello world. This was a very simple example, but now let's go forward and take few more examples. For the next part, we will be adding a new text input, add, and we would modify its default value to call it default value and label to text input. Now let's add another client script, log change in input. For now, we will console simple text changed. We add this client script, then we go to text input, events, and add handler, use the new script that we added, log change in input, save, reload. So if I were to change the value, I should see a log, an ID, right? It says the text was changed. But since it is an text input and we are in client script and we know that we should be able to access the value of it, so let's see how we can do that. So if you were to go to the client script, you would see, so whenever this client script is called, it calls this function, which is called handler. And ServiceNow provides you these four inputs: API, event, helpers, and inputs. For now, we will concentrate on these two objects, that is API and event. So let's log it. Let's log and see what are the values that are provided with it. And since we don't need the last one, we can delete that. Apply, save, reload. We have changed the value, and we see now we have two objects in our log, API and event. Let's open the event for now, and you see within event there is an object called payload, and within payload you would see the value, field value default followed by a space. Let's change it to this is new value, and then object and this is the new value. So this is how you access values that are passed along event. Again, this is very similar to how it happens in JavaScript in the browsers. Whenever you attach an event to a text input, you would receive an object called event, and event would have a property called dot value. Within ServiceNow, it would be event.payload dot field value. One thing that you need to understand is that this event payload will differ for each input that you use. For now, we are using a text input, so it's field value. If it is a drop down, it might be just the ID of the value that you selected, or if the text input, again, it will be a text. So it will differ for each input. The best way to understand what you have is to log the whole object, or maybe just the event.payload, and once you have the value, use it as you want to. Apart from your current input payload values, Another thing that you can access using client script would be client state parameters. After this, we'll look at data resources, but for now, let's create a new client state parameter. Let's call it parameter param1 and put in a random value, and we will apply. We will go back to our log hello client script, and we will try and log the value there as well. And param1 would be API dot state dot param1, and that's it. Apply, save, reload. And if I were to click hello, I should see two logs. One is hello world and second would be the value in that client state parameter. We see hello world, but we don't see the other value. Let's see why that happened. Because it wasn't saved properly. Let's try it again. And hello world, and the second would be param1 random value. So we have now accessed the value which is part of the event. That would be the field value. Next, we have accessed the parameters. Now, the third part, and that is one that is used most often, is the data resources. Now that we have accessed client state parameters, the next step would be to access data resources. For this, on our page, we have added a data resource, and it looks up a single record on incident table, and it looks up this particular hard-coded incident. So when you click on result, you would see active, assigned to, assignment group, description, and the short description. These are the fields that we have selected as written fields on this data resource. So if I were to go to the client script here, I would be able to access all the data that we saw using API.data. Now once you click dot, it will show you all the data resources that you have available. You can look up the name and write it yourself, but in most cases this autocomplete will help you. So incident dot result, since it will only give us a single result, we can log this whole object. Save and reload. Let's click on hello, and we see our API data object. We see active, assigned to, assignment group, description, and the short description. For each field, you will see two values. One is value and one is display value. Similar to in assigned to, display value would be the name of the person and value would be the sys ID. One thing to note here is that UI Builder does not have a very strong documentation, and one thing that I found very useful is logging the objects to browser console. Now this is something you would remove once you ship the feature to prod, but in the meanwhile, if I did not know that each field would return as value and display value, you could easily log it to console and open and see how values look like, and then use it. This reduces the amount of friction that you would have between designing and implementation. Now that we have a basic understanding of how client script works, we will take an example where we would use multiple things that we learned today. What we want to do is that we want to show up a select box where we would have a list of all active incidents. Right, so we will remove all the objects that we have on the page, and we will add a select box. Now select has some list values already added to it, so we'll click on edit. Now what we're trying to do right now is that we need to understand what kind of data would this component accept, right? So if you click on edit, it will show you that ID and obviously label is something that you need, but the only thing that is mandatory is ID and label. But you still don't know what is the JSON format that you need to provide. So for that, you can open the drop down and select JSON. Either you can try to understand how this works, or you are also given an option to look at the schema. Now this is extremely important if you're working with an LLM. Providing the exact schema would help a lot, preventing mistakes from the LLM side. But for now, we know that we need an array of objects where we would need an ID, which would be a string, and we need a label, which would again be a string. So let's try it out. So for now, what I'll do is I will convert this to data binding and use scripting, and we will change the one that is provided out of box to use something that we do. Okay, so Control Shift and remove, delete, and we will return array of object ID, ID1, and label. Save and reload at this end. So we have a label and its ID is not shown, but it is ID1. Now that we know what is the data that this drop down needs, let's see what is the data that we receive from the data resource. We will remove this, or let's add another one, and that will be lookup multiple records. Add, we will select incident table, and we will set condition to be active true. Apply, and we will just return short description and nothing else for now. Short description. We see that we have 43 records and each record returns something on this line. So we can assign the drop down has two values, right? So one is our ID, we will use sys ID for that. So that will be underscore data dot unique value, and we will use number as label. So that would be dot number dot value. Let's go to our script that we written. So here we will write a new return line, and that is api.data.lookup multiple records dot results. Now this is an array, so we will use map function incident, and since we need to return an object, we will return simply an object. ID would be incident dot underscore row underscore data dot unique value, and our label would be similarly incident dot number dot display value, right? So let's also convert this into a string and let us see if it works out. Apply and save and reload. And we see that we have populated all the incidents here. Now let's see what happens on an event that triggers when you select a value here. Let's jump to our UI builder to connect the value to log change in input, right? So the event, we will set item selected and client script, log change in input, continue, add. Now we don't know what is the kind of event payload we would receive, so let's simply console log the event itself. So that's it. Apply, save and reload. Let's change a value and see what it looks like. So this is the event, and the payload is the ID is your sys ID, and the label is your incident number. That's it. So now what you've done is you have picked values from a data resource using client script and converted that into an object that this drop down would accept, and connected that event when a user actually selects a value to showing those values within a console log. Right, now we will do one last thing before stopping. So we want to set a new client script parameter which will save selected incident. Input initial value will keep it empty, but on this selection we will go and populate this value. So log change in input API dot set state, and I don't remember the name of the client script, so let's go and copy that. Cancel, log change in input. The first parameter would be name of the client set parameter, and second would be event.payload dot value, and we will see how does values. It is payload dot item dot id. Okay, item dot id, and I want to show this value on the screen so that we can confirm that it is working. So we will choose in stylized text and set the value from it to be from data client state selected incident null for now. Apply and save. Did I select the wrong? Okay, so that was wrong. That would be H1. This is that needs to change. Client state selected. Apply, save, and reload. The moment we change, we expect, yeah. So you see the sys_id has been set to the client set parameter, which then populates this stylized text. Before I leave for today, I like to give you one small tip that has helped me a lot. Remember, the client script run in browser. That means all the debugger and console logs are easily available within your browser. For example, on this particular script, if you were to add this debugger, this will initiate the out-of-box browser's debugger. So if I were to refresh this page and open the console, and if I were to change any value, it automatically pauses the debugger, and then you can go and easily look at all the values that you were working with. Let me see how you go there. So yeah, so here's the debugger, and at this point each and every variable value can be accessed here. For example, if you could look at API or the event and then work with it. So since it runs in browser, all the debugging tools that you normally use are available. Use those, especially since ServiceNow does not provide a detailed documentation for UI Builder. This would be immensely helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.